everybody, and welcome to Right Here, Right Now, live Buffalo football talk. I'm your host, Alex Brasky, alongside my co-host, Ajay Cybulski, here for the Batavia Daily News and Livingston County News. Each week, we'll discuss Buffalo's favorite football team, along with all of the comings and goings from Orchard Park. What's up, AJ? Tell the people what we have in store for them today.
Yeah, excited. Again, thank you all for tuning in on this fine Thursday evening, our first Thursday show.
Very fine Thursday.
For very fine Thursday evening, our first Thursday show. So excited to, dive into the stuff we'll talk about today with our two great guests, Matt Bove from WKBW and Nate Geary over at WGR Sports Radio 550. We'll discuss the 53-man roster a little bit, discuss maybe some guys that we think could potentially sneak in, maybe some surprise cut candidates as the season is now not in full swing, but we're getting to the point where there'll be a little dull period, and then training camp is, here at the end of July. So we'll start touching on that a little bit, and then we'll talk about some wings and golf with Nate Geary later, and then we will talk about rookie minicamp, which starts tomorrow. Which Alex, I know you'll be there, so excited to discuss that as well. So there's a lot going on. Again, a little bit of downtime, but if you are listening, make sure to comment, like, share, review. As we continue to build this pod, the Right Here, Right Now, live Buffalo football talk with myself and Alex, excuse me.
Yeah, spit it out, AJ, over there. Jeez. Before we get to our first guest, let's discuss the latest news out of One Bills Drive. You mentioned it already. Rookie minicamp coming up on Friday. Excited to get back to either the practice field or inside the field house there in Orchard Park. Rookie minicamp officially set for May 10th and 11th. Also, OTAs will resume May 20th through 21st and continue May 23rd, and then the 28th through 30th, June 3rd and 4th, and June 6th. Mandatory minicamp slated for June 11th through 13th. Really excited to see these rookies out in a practice setting for the first time, wearing that Bills red, white, and blue, and really what I'm looking forward to most, obviously seeing Keon Coleman out there for the first time, running around with his teammates, being as expressive as he typically is. Quite the personality is Coleman. But AJ, what are you looking forward to most out of this rookie minicamp? A lot of storylines to watch for. Dwayne Carter coming in, trying to work his way into that defensive line rotation. Cole Bishop, perhaps he'll crack the starting lineup to begin the regular season. Then you have a bunch of later round guys trying to fit in and make their way. What's your top storyline? What are you looking forward to most with rookie minicamp coming up?
Yeah, I think just the combination of guys coming to One Bills Drive, guys that Brandon Beane and the scouting department have obviously done their due diligence on since, October of last year. So they've done their due diligence on these guys. That Brandon Beane obviously trusts the scouts during college football season, and then Beane really dives into it after the Bills season ends. So he's obviously been doing that since the Senior Bowl. But yeah, I'm excited to see all these guys. Cole Bishop, a guy you mentioned, one of my favorite picks, how he's going to kind of develop into the type of player Bobby Babich and Sean McDermott want him to be. There's a lot of interesting rookies that can be discussed. I mean, we've talked about it extensively over the past couple of weeks here on Right Here, Right Now. So there is a lot of players to talk about, a lot of things to talk about, but again, it's kind of more of a walkthrough. I know it's not that intense. It's just kind of, I hope everything goes smoothly. The players that come to One Bills Drive have a nice, relaxed, couple days and really feel the culture that Sean McDermott and this staff have built over the years and just kind of dive right into it and become teammates. That's the goal here. It's more about right now getting to know each other and becoming teammates and men in a locker room than the X's and O's part of it. That'll come as time goes on.
Yeah, you mentioned it before. The lack of drama surrounding this year's not only rookie minicamp, but the OTAs coming up, and no player potentially going to be absent from the proceedings. So that takes an element away and really puts the focus on the football and the proceedings on the field, which is kind of what every fan is hoping for. And really that distance from the drama is what I think Bills Mafia is hoping for this year. But when it comes to the Bills 53-man roster, we discussed a few rookies on our past show, draft recap. Keon Coleman, the second-round pick, Cole Bishop, Dwayne Carter, Ray Davis, another player, the fourth-round pick, the running back, potentially coming in and complementing James Cook. But it could be a tough road for a few of these late-round picks to make the roster. Do you see any surprises there? Any of these rookies cracking the final 53-man roster out of training camp, or perhaps any veterans that they brought in from free agency coming through and cracking that final 53-man? I think KJ Hamler cracks the final 53-man roster. The speed that he has, you bring in a Deontay Hardy last season, doesn't work out, and now you have Hamler, maybe another player you can fit into that gadget role on the outside, and potentially fit him in as a punt returner too. Just incredible speed. What do you see happening when it comes to the 53-man roster? Something we'll discuss with both of our guests coming up.
Yeah, I think something that we haven't really touched upon that I think will be interesting to see how it plays out is the linebacker corpse behind Milano and Terrell Bernard, Nicholas Morrow, the veteran free agent signing, Deion Jones, and another veteran free agent signing. So, and then you have Shio from Washington, the rookie 5th-round pick. So there's 3 guys right there that it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I think, and Joe Marino obviously made the original point, but it's very true, and I'm going to reiterate it again. They had to rely on Ajay Klein and Dorian Williams last year. Ajay Klein was on vacation with his family before being called by Sean McDermott to return to the team, was obviously playing very valuable snaps.
Yeah, on the couch, as they say.
Yes, on the couch. And then Dorian Williams obviously had some issues in terms of understanding the playbook, where to be, and reading the NFL defense and knowing where to be. So Dorian Williams, I'm assuming, takes that jump, I think, in year 2, like you saw from Terrell Bernard, where he's going to be more called upon, more relied upon when asked as depth, immediate depth. But the linebacker battle is going to be interesting. And then, of course, like you said, the wide receiver battle with KJ Hamler, Quintez Cephas, Andy Isabella, Terrell Shavers, Justin Shorter, Chase Claypool. Those are all names that you're going to have to really see battle it out. And Quintez Cephas is a guy that's had experience at the Lions. I know he's coming off that 1-year gambling suspension, but he's played in the NFL and has produced. KJ Hamler's been a little quiet in recent years, but again, like Nate Geary said later in a pre-recorded conversation, he brings kind of a difference to the wide receiver room and can be lined up anywhere on the field. And then you have a Matt Collins who, again, has that special teams leadership experience, good run blocker, and then the uncertainty with Justin Shorter. Andy Isabella, I would say, is kind of another one that's I'm unsure of just because he hasn't really produced at the NFL level in such a long time. And then Terrell Shavers.
I think a lot of people have forgotten about Isabella with all this wide receiver talk in this offseason. He was really the hot name last year, but he's really gone by the wayside, and maybe he makes his way back.
Yeah, because again, Alex, like you said, and Nate says again later in the pre-recorded interview that the kickoff rule obviously changes things, and Andy Isabella was asked to do some kick return duties at training camp at some point, sometimes in the regular season when he was called upon. But I think that's another avenue where Isabella can make the roster. And then, like I said, Shavers, a guy that Brandon Beane's obviously liked. They bring him back. They keep bringing him back. I think he really has an opportunity here. If he has a good camp and a good preseason, to crack the roster and be that 7th guy. And it'll be interesting, Alex. That's another conversation is how many receivers do they keep? Do they go with the 6, which they've been doing the last couple of years, or do they go with 7? And they've only done that 1 year under Beane. So as the obviously offseason progresses, we will discuss that, I'm sure, more in depth.
Yeah, I like where your head's at with the linebacking crew. Edifon Ulofoshio. I think that might be the position where they look for some special teams help. And like Nate says later in this show, I think that's where it's going to come down to some surprises when it comes to the 53-man roster. It's going to come down to special teams, as it typically does with the Bills, who can contribute in multiple phases, and we'll see down the stretch. But before we get to our guest, Matt Bove, who we'll discuss the upcoming schedule reveal with, do you like primetime games, AJ, as a fan who goes to games? You went to a few last year, I think, in the playoffs as well. Do you like them in prime time, or do you prefer the 1 o'clock, or you like me? Do you prefer the 4 o'clock? That's really in my wheelhouse.
Yeah, so I really don't have a preference, I would say. Like, I'm pretty, whatever the schedule is, that's kind of what I accept. I don't really have a preference. I would say I think the excitement around a night game, in the back half of last season, I did a lot of stuff with Syracuse.com of just writing like the game details as the game went on, play-by-play. So it kind of gave me a different feel of watching a game, especially at night. You're not in that element you usually are. You kind of relax. So I do like the night games a lot. But again, that might change throughout time. But as of now, I'm really open to, anything. 1 p.m. games are always fun. I love the 425 slot. Like you said, I think that's a pretty cool spot because then you could turn on Red Zone at 1 o'clock and watch all those games. So there's a benefit to the 4:25 and 8 o'clock in primetime games just because I love watching football so much that I don't really care. Obviously, I like watching the Bills, but red zone at 1 o'clock is just one of the best days for me. I just love doing that. And when the Bills play at 1, obviously that does not happen. So that's kind of where the debate happens. I love the 1 o'clock slot, but I also love the red zone time because there's usually 7, 8 games in that window. And you got Scott Hansen using the Octo box and all that stuff. So I do like the aspect of the 4:25 and night games just for that red zone time.
Yeah, as someone who's been in the building for primetime games and had to work after the game, it's not a lot of fun getting out of there after 2 a.m. Something that I would imagine our guest, Matt Bove, would agree with me with. Oh, excuse me. I'll get the right layout here. But Matt, how are you this evening? Thank you for joining us. We certainly appreciate your time. You're a father now and big-time power washer. We saw this weekend. A lot of success with that. What do you have planned this weekend?
Ooh, no chores this weekend. You know what? I'm going to have to cut the lawn, but I get a satisfaction out of cutting the lawn. So I've just leaned into the dad thing now that all of the chores around the house are almost enjoyable.
Big time red flag. You enjoy mowing the lawn. I'm not sure I vibe with that, but like I said, thank you for joining us. The sports director of WKBW at Channel 7, co-host of It's Always Game Day in Buffalo with our guy Sal Capaccio. And Matt, we were just discussing the schedule. What's your preference as someone who's in the building for every game during the season? Do you prefer the 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock, or primetime games?
On the road, I prefer the 1 o'clock just because then it gives us the most time to do what we need to do after the game. And then it's also usually not as tight of a turn to get back to Western New York, wherever we are, whether it's that we can leave that night or if we've got to wake up the next morning and come back. So I definitely prefer 1 o'clock games on the road. At home, I love the night games. I love the spectacle of the night games. I don't mind having to work until 2 or 3 in the morning because usually that means I don't have to wake up and travel the next day. So I can just kind of chill in the morning. It's a little different now when you have a baby who wakes up at 7:30 every single morning. But yeah, I love night games at home. I love kind of all of the energy that comes with that. I also think the bigger the game, I like when it's at night. I think back to, the Bengals game that didn't happen, the night of Damar Hamlin. That was a big game, and that felt like that needed to be on a big stage at night. So there's certain instances where what I just said about the 1 o'clock on the road games gets thrown out the window, but most of the time when the schedule comes out, I'm going to be hoping for a lot of standard 1 o'clock game in Baltimore. Great. Get on a flight that night, come home. Don't have to spend another night, but I know that's not going to happen.
Yeah, Matt, thank you for coming on, joining us. I've obviously enjoyed all your work, and obviously you had a very big hard-hitting topic with the Keon Coleman situation. So as your phone stopped buzzing with all the interaction you received from that, obviously that went viral, the Macy's extravaganza. So that was a very cool kind of introduction for Keon Coleman. And I'm sure left a great impression on many Bills fans and Bills Mafia members.
Yeah, no, it was crazy. The reaction to that, not necessarily a surprise because it was so just genuine and I think relatable for so many people that they loved the clip, but the numbers were absurd. I mean, the numbers on the post alone got 20 million views, and that was before it got aggregated anywhere. Everywhere picked it up. Within an hour, there was direct messages in my inbox from ESPN, Bleacher Report, FanDuel, Sports Illustrated, every outlet that you could think of wanting the video, and then they posted it themselves. So I think that what I thought was going to be a ho-hum, just hey, let's post another video, certainly took on a life of its own. And now 26 Shirts is selling a mug and a t-shirt that have a Cookie Monster wearing a yellow puffy jacket, catching cookies. And I'm like, how the heck did we get to this point? All I'm going to say is if Keon Coleman is good, he is going to be a treat to cover, but he's got to be good. He can't just be fun in press conferences. If he's good, I think people won't get enough of this guy.
Yeah, we waited a long time. It was a long night one, and we came up empty, no picks. We got to talk to Brandon Beane. That was it. Second day, we start off with a bang, and then when Keon Coleman comes to Buffalo on day 3, boy, did he deliver. That was a lot of fun. And then you see his expression in the Bills embedded and all that stuff in the pre-draft conversations. The Tiger wish he could comment. This guy just has personality for days. I can't wait to get to know him, but let's shift back to the schedule. That's really the main reason why we brought you in. You and Sal had a long discussion with Mike North, NFL VP of Broadcasting. What was your most significant takeaway from that conversation? For me, it was learning that the NFL really leans into storytelling, not only on a week-to-week basis, but when they look to assemble the schedule, they really look to sell the story to the fan. And I found that interesting, an interesting aspect of that conversation. You can find that on It's Always Game Day in Buffalo. But what was your most significant takeaway from that conversation?
Yeah, I like the point that you said about storytelling, because I do think that at the root of this is still a television show. This is still entertainment. Like, these NFL games are being broadcast so people can watch it as entertainment and enjoy it. And even subconsciously, there's usually a storyline in their head that they sometimes don't even know that they're watching a game for, but that's what the league is trying to get them to do. It's like, oh, when is Kirk Cousins going back to Minnesota? And Mike North brings up a point. Hey, that's a game that there's going to be a lot of hype around, but we want to get that done early because we want to make sure that, one, he's healthy, but two, it's not overshadowed by a potential playoff race for one of the two teams. It's almost not to the same level, obviously, but when Tom Brady went back to New England, that was an early in the season game. Like, that was one that they could have put out way further down the road, but they wanted to kind of get it over with, and they wanted to do it early in the year when they knew that the momentum was still going to be building and building. So I think your point about the storytelling is an interesting takeaway. For me, I'm always, I think, a little bit more interested in what is going to happen with the Bills schedule, and it feels like very much they are going to get the maximum number of primetime games. If it's not the maximum, they'll probably get 5. 6 is the most. If they don't get 6, they probably get 5, with the potential of another game turning into a primetime game down the road. And I mean, the quote that he said was like, we're not taking our foot off the gas with the Bills because Josh Allen is must-see TV and because of what they've been able to do for the last couple of years. So, we're obviously very close to it because it's the team we watch the most. But I think from the outside looking in, people really love watching the Bills because it's the Josh Allen experience. When he's good, he is as good as anybody in the league. When he's bad, he is sometimes just a train wreck that's happening in front of our own eyes. And that's great television.
Yeah, man, spot on with that. And who knows, they could have the 6 with a couple of 425 games on a Saturday game. So there's always mixing and matching, especially towards the end of the season when Saturday games really get underway. But your gut feeling right now, I'll put you on the spot. Where do you think the Bills will open this season and against who?
Okay, so math tells us that it is more likely to be on the road than it is to be at home, just because they have the extra road game this year. So they're going to play more games on the road. So it's probably a safer bet that they start the season on the road. Now, I know that there have been instances where teams have played a ton of consecutive years, starting at home, starting on the road. I just, for some reason, kind of get this, and this isn't even really from the Mike North conversation. It feels like the Bills are due a little bit for a letdown of a season opener, and I am totally okay with that. Like, I would be totally fine if it was the New England Patriots coming to Orchard Park for a 1:00 Sunday game, or the Tennessee Titans coming to Orchard Park for a 1:00 Sunday game. That's when I'm honestly hoping happens, because all of these games that are big time, like you could put the Bills against any of those road opponents and you could absolutely justify it. But at the same time, those are going to be big storylines for the entire season that they don't need to waste week 1. Like, everybody is like, well, what if they start against Houston because of Stephon Diggs? Right. That could totally happen. But you could also just do that game in week 6, and it's going to – people are watching football no matter what you put in front of them in the first week of the season. They are so and that's the same reason why every year they don't always start with what looks like the absolute sexiest matchup. It's why every year it's not Bills Chiefs right off the bat. There's going to be 45 million people who watch the game anyway. So check a box and say, okay, well, we like the upstart Lions. Like, honestly, Houston is there's a super great chance that they start the season on the road in Kansas City, because it's almost like what they did last year with Detroit, going on the road to start the season in Kansas City. So I would say right now, if I were a betting man, it would be like the Jags in Buffalo for a Sunday 1:00 game. But, that's just completely a guess.
Right. Yeah. I see what you mean with Houston, kind of similarly to what they did with Detroit last year, kind of anointing a team on the rise and a team that made plenty of moves this offseason and seems like they're ready to take another step in the AFC. But what's the most intriguing matchup for the Bills in your eyes? Or in other words, the game you're looking forward to most? I think for me, it is that Houston game on the road, Stephon Diggs, and just seeing how the Bills match up with, like I said, an up-and-coming team in their conference, one with a young quarterback who really set the league on fire last year, that could be coming for that crown that the Kansas City Chiefs currently hold, but also the Bills are fighting for. So I think it's that Texans game. Is it a different game you have an eye on? I'm sure a Miami LA game in early December would suit your fancy pretty well, going on the road for one of those games.
Yeah, for sure. That's one of the other things that I immediately look at. Like when the schedule comes out, I'm really hoping that Seattle or LA is before a bye week so then I could try and enjoy a little bit of time out there before I have to come back. I think the Houston game is probably the one that most fans are going to be the most excited about now. I just have a hard time, even though it's something we've seen so many times, thinking anything but Kansas City. These Kansas City games are almost always exceptional, win or lose for the Bills. I mean, the game that they played in the playoffs last year, I think gets overshadowed because of the way it ended and because it was once again the way the Bills, just like kind of crumbled at the end. It was a great game. It was a really, really good back and forth football game. And the 13 seconds game is the best sporting event at any level that I've ever attended. So you've got that year. You've got the year on Sunday Night Football when they went into Kansas City and they beat the crap out of them. Then they've got all these games where they win on the final drive with a Taron Johnson interception because of the Von Miller pressure or, some other play that happened at the end. So for me, it's like Houston, Kansas City, San Francisco, kind of in their own tier. And then the next tier after that, I would say, is the Jets and Miami, both of those games, just because I do think that those three teams are the real, contenders within the division.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of talent in the AFC. And I want to ask a quick question about the schedule in regards to the opponents. The AFC South and NFC West, that's the two divisions the Bills play this season. Just your thoughts on the tougher division. What division do you think will give the Bills more problems? You have the Colts with Anthony Richardson, Texans obviously up and coming team. The Jags added a lot in free agency, and then the Titans are the Titans, but they still have Will Levis, who came back and beat the Dolphins to help the Bills advance and win the AFC East. And then the NFC West obviously has a ton of talent as well. So just give me your thoughts on what division will give the Bills more fits this year.
I think the NFC West, just because I think of the teams that we have just said, the 49ers are still the best team. Even though you're getting them in Buffalo, I still think of those 8 teams, the 49ers are still far and away just the most complete dynamic team. I think going on the road to Seattle is a really tough place to go get a win. I don't care if Geno Smith is the quarterback. I don't care what the situation is. It feels like they're always pretty good at home. And then the Rams are a team that a couple of years ago, the Bills kind of bullied in that season opener. But I feel like the Rams then were, even though they were coming off of a Super Bowl, were kind of a shell of themselves without Odell Beckham, with just the roster that they had at that point. I think this Rams team is going to be sneaky good this year. So I think 3 of the games for sure are going to be difficult. And I also like the Cardinals more than I probably like the Titans, probably about as much as I like the Colts. Like I'm not, the Anthony Richardson hype is interesting to me because the sample size is so small. So like I hear people that I'm listening to on fantasy football podcasts and like dynasty rankings so in on the Colts. And I'm like, maybe, but I haven't seen anything yet to think that they're just going to once again be good. Like they could be fine. The Colts don't really worry me. Nobody in that division really does besides the Texans.
Yeah. Now, one more question about the schedule. What games, matchups or dates do you hope to avoid? We spoke with Nate Geary. He's coming up after you. He says he tries to avoid, I think it was Thanksgiving. Is that something you try to avoid? Obviously, with the newborn, I'm sure the holidays are going to be tough for you. Are those the days you look to avoid, or any specific time slot as we referenced earlier?
If it's at home, a Thanksgiving game at home, or a Christmas game at home, I think it would be inconvenient, but not like terrible. Just because for me, if they play a Thanksgiving game at home, it's in the late window. So it's at 8:00. So you have the entire day to do what you want to do with your family, with your friends. maybe even take a nap, and then try and head down to the stadium at 4 or 5 o'clock. Christmas is the same way. Mike North told us that they don't want to ruin Christmas morning, so they think that they would do like a 3:30, 7 o'clock kind of, or a 3:30, 6:30 for those two games, and that's the same thing. If it was a 3:30 game, leave my house at 1:30, get to the stadium a little bit later than I normally would, but at least you have Christmas morning. If it's on the road, those would be like very detrimental, and I do not want to do that with our daughter's second Thanksgiving and second Christmas, and probably the first one that she's going to remember. So yeah, that would be tough. Black Friday on the road would maybe be the worst of all of them, because then you're traveling on Thanksgiving. So that would stink. Besides that, though,
just go Dom and Bree Road Show.
Yeah,
just go full send. There you go.
Yeah, it's tough. It's funny because I say like, oh, it would really suck, but at the same time, it's also maybe the most fun part of the job is going to all the, going to the games and going on the road. The one this is not like a woe is me thing, but everywhere they are going this year, I've actually covered a game at before. So I don't get to check off. I'm like staying at the same amount of stadiums, which is totally fine. But like then you got guys like Capaccio
who problems here.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I totally realize that. But like Sal, I think has been to every stadium but Vegas and San Francisco because that was the COVID year. I'm not even close to that. I'm at like 20 something. But yeah, listen, amazing. I'm going to be at as many games as humanly possible, and I'm very fortunate that I get to do that.
Yeah, it is fun traveling during the holidays for games. One thing I remember, I think it was the Patriots game around Christmas a few years ago, just being in the city of Boston. And first of all, the discounted hotel rates. Second of all, you can walk around and it's like a ghost town. It is unfortunate that a lot of the bars and the restaurants aren't open, but at the same time, just walking around such a historic city with nobody else around, it was quite the experience. But yeah, I am not in favor of holiday games, especially Thanksgiving. That's probably my favorite holiday with the feasting. But yeah, that's certainly not something I look forward to. But
I will say, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Not the best game that I've covered because that was 13 seconds, but very, very, very high on the list is the Dallas Thanksgiving game. So that one, to be at that because of the stage, almost felt like the Bills arriving, and to be there for that was really cool because I think we all kind of felt like after that game, like, whoa, like they might be onto something here. Like they might not just be good. They might be really good for a really long time. And I've also never seen Miami at the end of last year was a little bit like this, but just the pure excitement and joy from the team after the win, even though it was a regular season win. Like I remember standing in the hallway and those guys like Jordan Phillips and Shaq Lawson and Trey White walking off the field in Dallas and screaming. And they were like, nobody believed it. Like, we're like, well, most of us like thought you were going to win. And they're like, not you, like F these guys and and I was like, whoa, like this is, and then going into the locker room, like it was like Cole Beasley was their hero and they're like throwing them in the air and they were like, screw them for letting you go. They were just such a fun team to cover because they were still so under the radar and they were at the same time like not superstars yet. Like covering Josh Allen in 2019 and 2018 was so much different than covering Josh Allen now. Josh Allen's a superstar now and he's like got requests to be on every interview ever. And then it was like, well, people don't really think he's that good. So he's just like a regular dude. You can go talk to him about whatever. So that was like the most fun game ever.
And like Tim Graham says, in the paragraph factory that AJ and I are in, and the video factory, I guess that you're in, you want to be there for the genesis of the story. You want to tell it kind of from start to finish. And you certainly got that opportunity being there for that Thanksgiving game in Dallas. AJ, what do you got for Matt before we get him out of here?
Yeah, I just want to say that Thanksgiving game, the throw to Cole Beasley in his own end zone, Josh Allen backed up, was probably
stupid.
Yeah,
stupid.
That was the moment, Matt, where I was just like, wow, this kid is he's going to be something. So that was definitely something I really remember from that game, and obviously the feast after on the field with the interviews is cool too. But switching topics real quick before you have to go. The 53-man roster. Any
Mm-hmm.
surprises coming in your eyes? Alex thinks that KJ Hamler has a sneaky opportunity to make this 53-man roster. I'm really unsure. I think the linebacker spot, it's just so early. I think the linebacker spot is going to be interesting. And obviously all those receivers that are packed up 4 through 7, 4 through 9, 4 through 10.
Mm-hmm.
So just where are you at? Any sneaky roster ads that could join this roster this fall?
No, nothing like specifically position wise, just because I feel like at this point, there's still going to more people just from a strictly numbers standpoint. But once they clear up that extra money, I think I'm going to be interested to see how they spend it. Is it with a pass rusher? Is it with a wide receiver? Is it with another defensive lineman? So, like you're scrolling down the list right now, it feels like Quentin Morris is a name that we've just kind of assumed will be on this team over the years. Are they going to keep 3 tight ends for sure? Are they going to bring in another name? I don't know. Tommy Doyle's another one as you're scrolling down here. Tommy Doyle has just continuously been injured, but was trending in a good direction before he ever got injured. I don't think it's a hot take anymore. I don't think it's a certainty that Damar Hamlin makes this team. I think that they've got other safeties now that are younger and might have more upside. I just don't think they could have ever moved on from him last year, but I don't think they absolutely have to keep him this year unless he definitely earns a job. After that, I mean, it's like, does Deion Jones make the team? Probably, but I don't know. I mean, there's the guys that are locks. There's always a surprise offensive lineman or two that's cut. Like you're getting to Will Clapp right here. When they sign Will Clapp, it's like, oh yeah, that guy started a lot of games in this league. That's a good, smart veteran signing. But then they also go out and they draft a couple people. Do they take the experience or do they take the upside? And then, like, I don't know about Casey Toohill or Dwayne Smoot, right? Like those guys.
That's who Nate said, and I'm giving something away. Forecasting here down the road. He said Casey Toohill. Keep an eye on him for a surprise cut.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like another player who has some upside and who has a little bit of productivity in the league. But what if they decide that they like somebody younger? Or what if Javon Solomon knocks their socks off this summer? Or what if they're like, hey, like this is our only way of keeping Kingsley Jonathan if we move on from Smoot or Toohill? So there will be surprises. It's just probably a little bit too early to guess them. The one thing I will say, though, to Alex's point, the way they've talked about KJ Hamler and the void that they have on their team, it feels like a little bit like Tavon Austin a couple of years ago, where there was a legitimate chance. I think at this point, when we're doing this now, people thought he would make the team, and even getting into training camp, it was like, oh yeah, I could see like a world where Tavon Austin makes this team. He ultimately didn't, but that's kind of how I feel about KJ Hamler. They don't have really anybody with a ton of speed who can be a vertical threat, and that's like all KJ Hamler can do. So maybe that'll work out.
Yeah, and I think Tavon Austin really was on his way to maybe cracking the roster, and then I think he sustained a groin injury or something of the like, and some injury struggles kind of hampered his ability to make the roster. But Matt, we really covered a lot. Really wanted to get to the schedule stuff. Being so close to the conversation with Mike North. And is there anything we left out? Anything you want to add, or how's the golf game? You're a dad now. I'm sure you can't get out as often as you'd like. But wrapping up, final thoughts and share whatever you have coming up on WKBW, and it's always game day in Buffalo.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you guys having me on. I know the podcast is still relatively new. So what am I, like, guest? Like, am I in the top 10? Like, am I in one of the first 10 on the podcast? That's cool.
I think you're number 6. I think you're number 6, if I have that number.
Who is this won't offend me. Who is the first call? Who is the first guest?
We had to feed his ego. It was Perino.
That makes. Hey, listen, I think that he's outstanding, so that totally makes sense.
He is, and he was, and he also was a big help to AJ when he first started in this business. So we thought it was only fitting to have him on.
The best Matt in the media room for sure that you had on. No, it's just it's going to be for things when we think they're going to get quiet, they don't. Obviously, we're doing this and rookie minicamp is right around the corner. And then after that, it's like, okay, then you've already got workouts that are happening in a couple weeks. You've got the Bandits playing in the NLL championship games. So we've got that covered for you over at Channel 7. And then after that, it's kind of like, okay, let's unwind for a little bit in June. Let's recharge the batteries a little bit, and then let's get going for training camp. So we're going to do a mock schedule episode on It's Always Game Day at Buffalo before the schedule comes out. But we have to time it right because we'll probably start to get some information early in the week, like right when the schedule. So the schedule basically will be sent out to the teams, and then they'll start to announce a game or two each day on the morning shows on all their partner affiliations. So like Good Morning America, Today's Show, CBS This Morning. So we have to kind of do a mock schedule before that happens, because then it could potentially throw a wrench in everything. And then, schedule day to me is like, it's like I'm a mad scientist. I've got like a wall and I've got Post-it notes everywhere, and I'm following the things that I've heard and the leaks that I've seen, and I'm like connecting the strings to all of them. And it's like, even though we already know where we're going, it to me is just so interesting and so fun. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun.
It's always exciting covering the NFL. The cycle never sleeps. Yeah. Matt Bove, Channel 7. It's Always Game Day in Buffalo. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for carving out some time, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.
Cut him off there, but much thanks to Matt. Great conversation with him. Learned a lot about his conversation with Mike North. I had listened to it previously, but just hearing him break it down and the various aspects of it, I really found that storytelling aspect intriguing. The Bills are an easy team to tell stories about. They have an underdog quarterback. They have Keon Coleman, the great personality. You have Sean McDermott becoming a polarizing figure in the NFL community for various reasons. And you have the Bills, one of the most polarizing teams in the league, still in search of its first championship. So I think there's a lot of stories to be told on this team, and I can't wait for them to be told. I just hope that we get some manageable scheduling when it comes to primetime games and holiday games. I hope the players, the coaches, and also us in the media aren't stretched too thin this season.
Yeah, I'm excited for the schedule. It's honestly one of the biggest, most fun days for me, just because I love to see, where the Bills are playing in primetime in their schedule. Like Matt said, feels like a rocket scientist putting up these things all over the place. But yeah, I really do.
It's like the meme from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Charlie Day, he's got the cigarette and the whiteboard, and he's like pointing to it. It's kind of like that. It's just things are all over the place, all the moving pieces. It is fun to follow, but boy, it is chaos.
Yeah, there's always storylines when you have Josh Allen, and I'm sure again there'll be a lot more this season. So we'll see how the year shapes out.
Yeah, so we'll get to our next guest here, bringing in Nate Geary of WGR 550, a pre-recorded conversation with him this afternoon. Got into his golf game, got into the Bills and roster, some rookie discussion, even touched on the schedule as well with Nate. So we hope you enjoy our discussion with Nate Geary. All right, time to welcome in our next guest, Nate Geary, Buffalo Bills pregame, halftime, and post-game and pre-game show. He does really the whole gamut there on WGR 550. A scratch golfer with a body like Fred Couples. Nate, thank you for joining us. You can follow him on X at Nate Geary Sports. Are you questionable for your Saturday morning foursome? How's the neck?
Neck's struggling, man. And I am not a scratch. I wish I was a scratch. I'll take my humble 6 and go home with that. But
we like to butter up our guests here right now.
Listen, I appreciate that, but I know Twitter. I'll have 5 of your listeners DMing me about wanting to play 1v1 since they heard I was a scratch golfer. But yeah, no, been fighting through some neck issues here early in the season, but hopefully it'll be smooth sailing here in a couple of weeks. Start really taking advantage of the nice weather we're getting here in Western New York. This is the early to mid-May is like some of my favorite time for Western New York golf. It's when you get some of the greenest grasses and some of the best conditions you'll have all year is right now. So yeah, couldn't be a better time to get out on the golf course in Western New York. That's for sure.
Nate, thank you for joining us. You've obviously played a number of famous courses throughout your life. What has been your favorite course that you've played at?
Ooh, gosh, that's a loaded question.
That's what we do here.
I would say it's probably somewhere. I would say it's probably a tie. 2 U.S. Open courses. The Bethpage Black course I played 3 years ago now, and then 2 years ago I played Brookline Country Club where they had the 2022 U.S. Open. I'd say it's a pretty firm tie between both of those courses. Different in many ways, but the similarity is that they humble even the best of golfers. But I love any course where you feel like you are, kind of like sitting amongst history, like coming up on 18 at Brookline. 6 months later is when Matt Fitzpatrick hits that shot of the same bunker that I hit out of. I did not put it as close as Matt Fitzpatrick did. But, walking up there to 18, finishing, shaking hands, and then looking up where, I think it was the 99 Ryder Cup team, Phil Mickelson was, and all of them were up on the rooftop patio celebrating their Ryder Cup championship. And then obviously next year, the Ryder Cup will be at Bethpage Black too. So a lot of, I would say those are probably my top 2 for sure.
So U.S. Open courses, you're not putting Grover Cleveland up there, another former U.S.
The 1912 U.S. Open. Yeah, that's right. Just a couple of years ago.
Right. I don't think any of us were around for that one. But all right, enough golf talk. We do have to get you out to Batavia Country Club, Terry Hills.
Absolutely.
AJ the other day shot a 39 at BCC, so the guy can really stroke it. We'll have to put you guys up against each other. But
I'll take Nate. Give me like 40 strokes, and I'll see what happens.
Let's dive into the Bills roster. That's why we brought you on. 53-man roster projections. You're starting to see them surface on social media, and a good time to talk about it with rookie minicamp coming up, OTAs about to come back around. Do you have any surprises you see making their way out of training camp with a jersey? I'm sorry to say it, but I'm going to go with Chase Claypool. I think the upside that he presents, I know he hasn't done it in many years, but this will be the first time he's playing with a legitimate quarterback since Ben Roethlisberger early in his Pittsburgh career. If he and Josh Allen can kind of mesh together and create that chemistry throughout OTAs and training camp, I think it's going to be Claypool. But do you have any surprises in your mind when it comes to the Bills' final 53-man roster out of training camp?
I maybe not a surprise make as much as maybe a surprise cut. Casey Tuhill's a guy they went out and signed this offseason, but obviously is a position that they, addressed later on in the draft in the 6th round. Solomon Kidd out of Troy, who's, one of the more productive players in college football over the last 2 years, leading the NCAA last year in sacks. And obviously that, they've used free agency to fill the position. They brought back Ajay Epinesa. I don't know that they have that top end player at the position. But Casey Tuhill's a kind of that effort guy, doesn't have a lot of, he's not a double-digit sack guy, or hasn't been over the course of his career in Washington. But I think to me, it's so tough when you try to do roster projections, 53-man roster projections in May, because I like to think of sort of the things that maybe some of the things that lied to us during training camp last year, which was, I thought Khalil Shakir had a very poor training camp last year, and really found himself buried on the depth chart for the first 3, 4, 5 weeks of the season. And then, we saw his game elevate. We saw his role increase. I think I said it was like maybe 12 snaps week 1, and then led the team in snaps over the last 3 weeks at the wide receiver position. So I think even with the guys that really impress you during training camp, it doesn't necessarily translate over into if or when they make the 53-man roster success on the field during the regular season. And I think equally as much, the guys that struggled during training camp aren't always the players that they appear to be during training camp. So I always look forward to training camp and mini camp season. But you tend to get a better feel when you turn the game film on and you get preseason action, where I thought Shakir played well in the preseason. He just didn't really particularly play well down to down, rep to rep in practice. So for me, that defensive end position is, I want to stop short of calling it deep because I don't think it's particularly top heavy, but I do think there are a lot of bodies there. And I'm sure there will be a surprise veteran cut with sort of the pieces that they brought in to supplement the top 2, which of course, Greg Rousseau and Von Miller.
Yeah. Khalil Shakir is a perfect example, Nate, of a guy that came in his rookie season, struggled in the run blocking aspect of his game, rarely saw the field. Then again, last season, like you mentioned, I think in the preseason and training camp struggled a bit, and then you see his run blocking develop throughout the course of the season, which then led him to more opportunities on the field, took full advantage of it. Another guy that the Bills kind of brought in for that same role, Matt Collins. There's a lot of debate around him surrounding if he's a roster lock. I put out something on Twitter, and a lot of people mentioned KJ Hamler, which, again, KJ Hamler did not play a snap last year and has only played 10 games in the last 3 seasons, compared to a Matt Collins who's seen the field in 30 games in the past 2 seasons. So, again, a big difference there. So maybe talk about that intriguing wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 camp battle. And then on a scale of 1 to 10, once you answer that, if the Bills season started today, how confident are you with the Bills wide receiver?
Yeah, it's intriguing, sort of like, am I going to choose between, grape nuts and Cheerios? It's not very sexy, but it'll get the job done. It'll keep you full. Lots of fiber, right? That's kind of what this wide receiver room, sort of screams to me.
You get older, Nate, you need that fiber.
That's right. The fiber plays an important role in digestion. You want to have the right bacteria in the stomach, right? These are all things you start to think about when you get older. And that's right. The special yogurts. Right. I think that it's not a particularly overwhelming or overwhelmingly intriguing position from the fact of, are good to great players not going to make this roster? I think the conversation is interesting around KJ Hamler because he seems to be appearing a lot, whether it's team videos that they're posting. He is a really intriguing name. Obviously, it was kind of a flyer once he was like one of those first priority free agent signings when the regular season ended. And I'm sort of wondering what his role could be. And I think because his diverse skill set, I think you have a lot of redundancy right now on the roster. Matt Collins, Chase Claypool, Keon Coleman, these larger bodied receivers that are boundary receivers. There's not a ton of depth any longer in the slot. So I think a guy like KJ Hamler, who I think can also play special teams, that's really where I think his value elevated during the draft process when he was at Penn State was, well, this is a guy that can also return kicks and is an electrifying kick returner. This is a team right now that doesn't have, to me, a clear-cut guy other than maybe Ty Johnson as your team's kick returner, as the rules in the NFL are set to dramatically shift and lean more towards into returning and getting returns in the kick game. So with that, I don't think there, to me, is room for Matt Collins, Keon Coleman, and Chase Claypool. To me, it's a firm battle between Claypool and Matt Collins. And I'm going to lean towards the special teams credibility and experience of a Matt Collins who can, by the way, they're losing a gunner in Saran Neal. So I do think that they're going to need somebody in that gunner role. And Chase Claypool does not really, and again, and I said this the second the signing happened, you are talking to one of the biggest Chase Claypool proponents coming out of the draft. Is a guy that I really wanted the Bills to target. Amazing college career at Notre Dame. And if anyone knows me, knows I'm a big Notre Dame fan. Loved Chase Claypool. That ship has sailed for him as a pro, because he's not walking off the bus and is your first or second best receiver anymore. And if he's not your first or second best receiver, well, then he needs to be a special teams ace. And I just don't know what evidence anyone has over the last 2 or 3 seasons that screams to you that Chase Claypool is the type of effort, hustle, heart player that will be required of the person that makes the team in this role to play special teams, when that is exactly who Matt Collins has been his entire career. So that battle for the bottom of the room, I think is interesting, maybe short of intriguing. But I think there is a lot of redundancy on sort of the outside there. And then as for and you said the sort of the state of the position, right? As it stands,
1 to 10, how confident? If it started today,
probably a 3 or a 4. And that's not to tell you that I hate the position or that I hate the Coleman draft pick. I like Keon Coleman. I think that there's a very interesting route to where or how he might be successful early and how that might change year 2, year 3. But I do think that he's a very interesting piece in this offense. I like Khalil Shakir a lot. I like Curtis Samuel. I don't exactly know what you're getting in a 27-year-old Curtis Samuel. after a couple of years of sort of down play in Washington, again, albeit with bad quarterbacks. I think the quarterback with the most touchdown throws to Curtis Samuel is Kyle Allen in his career. If that doesn't scream, that's a guy that has not had a real chance to play with elite quarterbacks. I think that's, part of the conversation there. But I think if you ask me as a whole how I feel about the pass catchers, now I think that changes a little bit. I would maybe move that closer to a 5 or 6 when you're adding in Dawson Knox and obviously Dalton Kincaid, because I do think they've got a really good tight end room. But can Joe Brady get more in the passing game out of the tight end room, other than to say we want to run more 12 personnel and have a full-time blocker in there? So I think as a pass catching group, I feel a little bit more optimistic than I do specifically about the wide receiver room, which I think lacks that veteran that's done it. I was hoping it was going to be Odell Beckham Jr. Obviously, he gets signed in Miami. I'm going to not hold my breath on a Michael Thomas. That's not a player that I'm particularly interested in, again, for the same reasons we talked about with Chase Claypool, not a guy that's going to come out here and help you on special teams. So then who is it? I don't think that guy exists. Maybe it's MVS. I think they do need another speed element, a downfield backside 9 guy that can at least strike a little fear in defenses, because that is a throw that Josh Allen and very few other quarterbacks are capable of making as a 3rd or 4th read, is the backside go route. And he can do it and has done it sometimes to a fault. But I think you always want to keep that safety valve in an offense. And right now, I'm not sure that player exists on the roster.
It's an interesting way of looking at the wide receiver room through a special teams lens. And it's a good way to look at it. You lose a Saran Neal, you lose the number of special teams contributors that they did from a season ago. You're certainly going to have to replenish in that regard. And it will be interesting to see how Keon Coleman fits in. Will he get the number of targets everybody's expecting? Will it take him a little bit to catch on? So a lot to stay tuned with in terms of the wide receiver room. One thing's for sure, if Coleman doesn't fit in with the Bills on the field, I think he's got a career in media or comedy perhaps ahead of him, or perhaps as a Popeyes cashier. I mean, we saw that on social media this weekend as well. But moving on to the rookie class, which of these first-year players excites you most with rookie minicamp coming up on Friday? We'll be there at One Bills Drive. Is it Coleman? Is it a late-round guy like a Cedric Van Pran Granger? I like Van Pran Granger. I think he can challenge for a starting spot, maybe left guard or center out of training camp. I'm not so high on the David Edwards, Connor McGovern situation. McGovern's never played center in the NFL. Edwards, a recent injury history and didn't get much time last year outside of his role as the jumbo tight end. So I think you're expecting a lot from two players in new roles. And I think Cedric Van Pran Granger could sneak up and be waiting in the wings there.
Yeah, at the center position, I definitely agree with that. I think at some point he starts games. His resume speaks for itself. Second team All-American last year, first team All-SEC the last 2 seasons, started 44 straight games, captain in his last 2 seasons. Is a player that really checks a lot of boxes. And I think it was John Ledyard that put sort of with Van Pran that the draft process wasn't particularly good to him. Short arms, didn't test particularly well, but you turn on the film, he's a guy that is constantly downhill, great player, a great leader. So yeah, I think for me, that's definitely somebody I'm looking at. To me, at first, I think a lot of people, once you shook off the fact that they didn't take a receiver in the second round, and they didn't do the double dip like maybe a lot of people had hoped, I like Cole Bishop a lot. I think his game reminds me a lot of Jordan Poyer early on, a guy that can play the box, can play the deep, can play deep half, can play deep middle, can play cover 3, cover 4, cover 2, and then be a box defender. And I think he's going to push Taylor Rapp for a starting position right away. And it would not shock me at all if the versatility between, Bishop and Mike Edwards maybe even elevates the safety position a little bit over what they had last year, just based on the injury history and the on and off play of Micah Hyde. And then obviously I think a very reduced version of Jordan Poyer last year, where they ran more dime looks out of necessity, moving Rapp into that deep safety role. And I really like that a lot. If you're swapping out Cole Bishop for Jordan Poyer, you're sacrificing, 10 pounds, but I think you're creating more versatility. What he was able to do during the Senior Bowl was really elevate, I think, his draft stock on what he was doing in coverage and man coverage and zone. He can do both of those things. And to me, it's also him as a blitzer. That's why I like him a lot in potential dime situations. That's where you bring Rapp on the field, have him play as your second linebacker. And we know that at least the version of the defense that Sean McDermott called, by the way, I do think Sean McDermott's going to call defense again next year. I don't have any insider information. I think it's an inkling. I think he got the itch. I think he was very juiced up about doing it. And I thought they had great results short of being down to their 5th and 6th linebacker in an AFC divisional game against one of the greatest tight ends ever.
I think if they were going to make that move, I think they would have already announced it already that Babbage
I agree.
would be calling the plays. I don't think they'd be waiting to announce that Babbage is going to be the play caller.
I totally agree with that. And I think with that, Bishop maybe represents a player that can really thrive in the blitzing role on 3rd down there as well. So to me, the versatility, the ability to stand up on day one and start, and then obviously I think right away, even if he doesn't win a starting job, I would be surprised if he doesn't. That special team prowess right there is the kind of player that I think you'd look at and making an impact right away. So I'm very excited about the pick of Cole Bishop. Some people thought it was a reach in the 2nd round. Some people saw him as a 3rd round player. But I think, all the reviews that I've heard from people that I, respect and follow and watch a lot of film, all really like the pick, especially from the versatility and, the coach that he's paired up with, who is, kind of a defensive back whisperer.
Yeah, Cole Bishop, Nate, along with me, was my favorite pick. I, saw him at the Senior Bowl in Mobile. Like you said, he really upped his game and level of play there and really showed NFL scouts and executives who he truly is, the versatility, obviously off the charts. And I think the McDermott thing real quick, excuse me, talking with like the McDermott part of this defense, I think Babbage, that can also help him develop these younger players on the defensive side of the ball. So he can focus still more on, he'll have the title of defensive coordinator, but he can develop these younger players that are now on this defense that, the new wave. So along the lines of Cole Bishop, who do you think has more snaps this year? And this might be an easy question because obviously now I know you're very high on Cole Bishop like myself, but Dwayne Carter or Cole Bishop, who has more snaps in 2024?
I think Cole Bishop, and I think it's strictly because of the position that he'll be playing. I think it's going to be hard to take Bishop off the field. And I think if you're moving him from safety into the box, he's still staying on the field. I think there's a very good chance that he's a 3-down player, where Dwayne Carter, like him a lot, that's the position even the best player on that defensive line is going to be in some level of rotation. So because of that rotation alone, I do think that gives the leg up to Cole Bishop. But I am excited from, again, another guy at the Senior Bowl that I think helped his draft stock considerably. A high motor player, a guy that really, I think, can stand out in pass setting downs. I really like him maybe coming in for a Daquan Jones on 3rd down, and having him and Ed Oliver in the middle really excites me. So yeah, no, I think Carter's going to have also a role right away as a complementary rotational piece, and I think his role grows throughout the season. But I think it's going to be very hard to keep Cole Bishop off the field in any capacity.
And now we're all waiting the NFL schedule release to shift gears here from personnel to more grand scope discussion. A lot of people thought it was going to be this week. Instead, it's going to be next week. And when you look at the Bills' 2024 opponents and potential game dates, is there anything from your perspective as someone who has to do the pregame, do the halftime, do the postgame, any dates that you're looking to avoid? Do you like the holiday games? Would you rather go without those? More Sunday 1 p.m.? What's a perfect schedule for Nate Geary, the pregame, halftime, postgame show host?
Never Thanksgiving ever again. I would prefer to never have a Thanksgiving game if I could help it. So for me, I like Sunday 1 o'clock games a lot. Gets me home by 8 o'clock. I can watch the night game on my couch, which I like. And I just kind of love the vibe that a 1 p.m. game, especially in September and October, have in Buffalo. When you get to the stadium, you got everybody tailgating outside at the kind of the quiet before the storm when I'm in the stadium. I love the 1 p.m., the vibe of the 1 p.m. games. But I do think those are largely a thing of the past. It wouldn't surprise me again if they have 2 or 3 of those, and then they got a bunch of 425 windows and national windows. Even when they're not playing prime time, they're a team that they end up playing a lot in that national window. 425, Tony Romo, you know the drill. So for me, I'm not a huge fan of Sunday Night Football. Love Monday Night Football. I can do a Monday night game all the time. Hopefully they get stuck again with just one Thursday night game, a bunch of Monday nighters and maybe 1 or 2 Sunday nights. And please, oh please, what I love to get Bills Jets on a Monday Night Football early in the season at home. That'd be a nice. I've turned my attention and my hatred towards Jets fans as it's like the enemy of your enemy is your friend. And that's how I've now started to view the Dolphins, because the Dolphins can't beat the Bills anyways. So why are we pretending? Well, what do we have to be so threatened about and hate Miami Dolphins fans other than their weird obsession with their quarterback, which is not much unlike Bills fans. A lot of Bills fans are obsessed with Josh Allen, but he's pretty good and has won a playoff game and so on and so forth. But to me, the idea in this conversation around the New York Jets that happens seemingly every year, definitely the last 2 years, that they're now, firmly in the Super Bowl window, it to me is laughable. So give me them early. Let's, have a Josh Allen bounce back game, a nice slap in the mouth for them would be great for me. So I would love a week 1, week 2 Monday Night Football Bills Jets at Highmark Stadium. That would be chef's kiss for me.
So along those lines, Nate, my next question for you is, can the ghost of Aaron Rodgers' past reclaim his MVP level and make all the Jets fans' dreams come true? Because, again, I think, in my personal opinion, last season going into it, I thought the Jets were the biggest they were the team that could dethrone the Bills in the AFC East just because of that defense. And now they add Mike Williams. They have Garrett Wilson. They got Malachi Corley, the yak machine. So do you think with that defense and Rodgers playing at a above average level, the Jets have the best chance of dethroning the Bills in the AFC East?
AJ, I can't believe you didn't mention their 36-year-old all pro tackle that hasn't played at that level in like 5 years, or I don't know. Like, to me, they did get Hassan Reddick, and that's a nice move for them on the edge. Because they used a first-round pick last year on Will McDonald, who played half the season, was a healthy scratch for the rest of the time because he was a bad first-round pick. To me, no. I mean, Rodgers was not good the last full season he played in Green Bay. They missed the playoffs. To me, sure, he was injured, or he had an injury to his thumb or whatever. But to me, at 40 years old, he's banged up, coming off of an Achilles injury, which, to no one's surprise, he didn't end up finishing the season in a playoff run for them. As someone that used to be a big Rodgers fan, I don't think this is the same player that, and I know he won an MVP 2 in a row not all that long ago. Father time comes quickly. And especially when you get to 40, 39, 40, 38, 39, 40 in the NFL at that position, the drop-off happens pretty quickly. Just go back in time to all the greats. Joe Montana, obviously concussion issues, but that game dropped quickly. Towards the end, it started to get ugly for Jim Kelly. It started getting quite ugly for Tom Brady, frankly, at the end, did it not? With Pro Bowl level receivers on the outside and a very good offensive line in front of him. So no, I don't think he's going to return to his MVP form. I think he will still be the best quarterback that it's been in a Jets uniform for, since Joe Namath, but
not saying much.
Right. I mean, you could put John Kitna, the ghost of John Kitna, in there, and he'd probably feel pretty good about that too. So, right. I mean, so I think for me, are they a legitimate threat in the AFC East? Sure. Are they a Super Bowl threat? Absolutely, unequivocally, no, they are not. They are, to me, not even in the top 7 in the AFC. That's still a team that's going to require their defense to be a top 2, top 3 unit to win football games. And defense is consistently the mountains and valleys thing. You can get your highest highs, but it's the hardest thing to sustain year over year is to have a top 1, top 2 defense. They've been incredibly healthy on the defensive side of the ball. They did get a little bit better on the offensive line. But I think, to me, that's a team that wide receiver room does not scare me. Mike Williams, I don't know. What's he look like after an ACL injury? He didn't look particularly fast before it. I like Malachi Corley a lot.
We lost him, Alex.
We did.
You got me now?
He's back.
Sorry, I had a call pop in. But I do like some of the pieces that they got and what they got at the wide receiver position. But outside of Garrett Wilson, Allen Lazard, I mean, I don't know. I'm not particularly worried about that room. And Breece Hall was talked about his coach was publicly shaming him at the podium for not hitting the hole the right way. So yeah, I don't know. This is not a team that screams Super Bowl contender. Could they contend for the division? Sure. I think it's very likely they'll be more in the wild card conversation than they will the division lead. So that's my take on the Jets.
All right, we got you going on Jets and Rodgers. We wanted to get you going on Tua and the Dolphins, but we're running out of time here, so we'll save that for next time. I know you could probably go on and on, but we missed your podcast, Food for Thought with Bruce exclusive. We couldn't let you go without asking you the hot topic that's been going around social media just the last few days. I mean, it's honestly always a hot topic, but it's been spurred on the last few days. The wing conversation. Does Barbell get too much credit as the best wing in Buffalo? It's kind of been anointed as the king of wings. From my perspective, I'm a 9/11 guy. Love the crisp. I love the simplicity of the hot, medium, mild. If you want a good sauce, Barbell is probably your choice. But what's your take on the entire thing? Is Barbell given too lofty praise in the wing discussion?
I think so. Again, this is not to say I don't like a barbell wing, but for me, delicious. For me, it's 9/11. I think they've got pound for pound the best wing I've ever had. I think Adolph's First Ward is right up there too, which is conveniently 2 blocks from my apartment, which is both a convenient thing and a disaster. I also think Beltline, which is across the street from my apartment, are also right up there as some of the best wings in Buffalo. Again, the bigger, crispier wing and the simplicity of the 9/11 sauces too, and their fries are terrific. I obviously took a couple years ago, I took Alton Brown on a wing tour with Andrew Galerno from the Buffalo News, or formerly the Buffalo News, I should say, and went to Barbell first and, liked it, but it was not on the top of his list as like checking all the boxes. But I do agree on the sauce. The honey butter barbecue is fantastic and delicious. But yeah, if I'm last day on earth and I got one more meal to have, it's going to be triple order 30 wings of 9/11 hots, and I'm going to down every single one of them. Also, I don't want people to sleep on wing nuts. It's a different wing.
It's a different experience, correct?
Different experience, but I do really like their wings as well.
AJ, your opinion? I think you've told me before. I think Sunny Reds, maybe.
No, Barbell is my favorite one, the Cajun honey butter barbecue with the homemade blue cheese. I just think it's like, how like with Duff's a couple years back, people started like, is Duff's really that good? Like, I think Barbell has such notoriety, and obviously Eric Wood, his great podcast centered on Buffalo, he's having all these Bills coaches, players come on and say that Barbell's their favorite wing, or the majority of them. So I think it's like a human condition where people just kind of like, okay, we're sick of hearing about Barbell being the best wing. Let's talk about something new. But I think Sunny Reds has a great wing, and Wing Nuts is, again, a very unique wing. The medium are super hot, so I always go the Wing Nuts mild. That's what Perino
I think that's my favorite sauce. Yes. The Wing Nuts mild, and then the honey garlic is my other. Those are like the two that I get. And I like hot. I like the Wing Nuts mild simply because of the taste. It's not even a hot or mild thing to me.
Yeah, so I'm right there with you on that as well. So yeah, there's a lot of great places, but yeah, Barbell's definitely hyped up, and people are definitely getting a little tired of it because there's a lot of great places in Buffalo.
Yeah, the mob mentality, I think, is taking over with the whole Barbell situation, but that's certainly not to discount the quality of their product. But Nate, we kept you a little longer than we imagined, but great stuff as always. Thank you for joining us. What do you got coming up, golf course or otherwise?
Yeah, I got actually a big golf trip coming up next month. I'll be going to Tobacco Road for the second time, which I'm super excited about. And then Myrtle Beach. So playing a couple of Legends courses down there. Super excited about that. Got 100 holes coming up next month that I'm hopefully going to get my body prepared for, where I'm doing for charity, walking 100 holes from the dusk to dawn, or dawn to dusk, whichever one comes first. So yeah, a lot of golf coming up here in the next couple of weeks, that's for sure.
Nate Geary, the life of Riley. Thank you for joining us, my friend.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Nate.
All right, a great conversation with Nate Geary. We'd like to thank him for joining us. Also, Matt Bove for joining us as well. We've had some great guests to start the podcast right here, right now, live Buffalo football talk, and very grateful for all of them spending a few minutes with us and dissecting what we've seen from the Bills this offseason. It's sure to be an exciting season, AJ. This is a team in transition. Brandon Beane admitted that in his post-draft comments. So I think there's a lot of discussion to be had over the next several weeks and months. Last season, there were a few positional battles. You think about Terrell Bernard fighting it out with Tyrell Dodson among them. But I think this year there's going to be so much to watch during mini camp, OTAs, and training camp, you're going to have to come back and watch RHRN each week.
Yeah, there's going to definitely be growing pains with this team. There's going to be growing pains with right here, right now as we continue.
Oh, that's what I thought you were going to say. Growing pains with us? Come on. Give us some credit here.
Yeah, there's going to be, it's going to be, we're all going to learn. I'll have the AirPods in next time. I finally figured that out after years and years of not having to figure it out. So I figured that out quick.
I think I piped in our video halfway through Geary's first little spiel there. I kind of took us by surprise in the corner. So yeah, certainly growing pains to be had on our end as well.
Yeah, so we'll figure those out. But yeah, we're getting our reps in. The Bills obviously need to get their reps in a big season. Again, I think there's a lot of uncertainty with this team. Brandon Beane said it himself multiple times. There's going to be growing pains. And a great question. I was just going to get to that. Growing pains, worse than midseason last year. Doubt it. That's the craziest thing about last season was Brandon Beane stood at the podium. I want to say near the trade deadline, Alex. I don't know if you remember this exact press conference, but he was discussing that this team is still trying to find its identity. And a lot of people took that as, how can this team still trying to find its identity 12 weeks into the year when they've all played together for so long and this culture has been established? So it was an interesting comment, but yeah, I think there's going to be growing pains. I think with a new up-and-coming young team with a lot of people you're trusting to be leaders that maybe haven't been in that position before, along with all the rookies that are going to have key snaps where in the past few years with Sean McDermott, he's gotten away with using veterans in most spots. He hasn't had to really count on the rookies. If Dorian Williams wasn't playing well, let's throw AJ Klein out there. Let's put Terrell Dodson in. So there's going to be, I think, more of a trust in the rookie class, the younger guys, and it's going to be a fun year again with growing pains.
Yeah, and a lot of good wing talk on today's episode. You and I indulged in 9/11 not long ago, and that was certainly delicious. It was my first time there. I think your AirPods are wreaking havoc on the end of our broadcast now. And now I can't hear you. So AJ has disappeared. I think that's our sign to wrap it up. So we'll see you next time on Right Here, Right Now. It's been a joy. Thank you, Nate Geary and Matt Bove, for joining us. For my cohort, AJ. Can we hear you now, AJ?
Yes, I'm back. I don't know what happened. I jinxed myself with the AirPods.
A little AirPods snafu.
Yeah.
Those are the growing pains we were talking about. But thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Peace out.